Hello everybody, this is Einar from Unity Center Web TV again. Today we have Frank Burdich from Germany, and he is going to talk about supersensibility, if I say it right. He has a very heavy background from biology and chemistry, but now he's working specially to help people find their sensibility and supersensibility, and I think that's super interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about how did you get started into this stuff? How did you find out this is your way?
Yeah, that's a very important thing to say, because I wasn't born with that, and so I developed the capacities over the time. And I, as you said, I have a background of chemistry and biology, which means I studied these subjects and being completely materialistic, which is believing in the molecules and thinking of knowing everything, you know, the structure formula of wood and of plastic, and I thought, well, that's the world. But I had neurodermatitis, also this illness where you scratch your skin so awfully until it bleeds, and someone gave me the advice, go to a classical homeopathist, which I did, and that changed my life. Immediately there were processes starting that didn't have anything to do with the neurodermatitis. Because of that I was there. For example, my headache disappeared and something like that. And after 1.5 years, this neurodermatitis disappeared. And so I understood when reading about homeopathy, well, that has nothing to do with my beloved molecules. Must be completely different. So I lost the ground under the feet as a chemist, and I had to find something new. Well, and for some reasons, anthroposophy came to me. It could have come anything else, but it was anthroposophy.
What do you call it?
Anthroposophy.
Anthroposophy. Okay, yeah.
Anthroposophy. And well, so then I began reading these books about 23 years ago, and so first time to read about supersensible worlds, and at this time I discovered something strange, that I was very, very slightly able to perceive that also. There's a nice story when I was sitting at my writing desk as a student learning something, and suddenly I had the feeling, well, here's something at my shoulder, where there was nothing to be seen, but here's something. When I moved, interestingly, it didn't move with my body, but it was like staying in the room. So, what's that? And then I took my hand and moved it through the room, and I said, well, here's something that I can feel. As if a shadow would fall on my hand, but there wasn't a shadow. And then I said, what's that? It was like an invisible wall that I was able to feel. And well, I had no concept at all, but that was a very good start with that, when reading about supersensible worlds and suddenly perceiving, well, there is something I can perceive.
Yeah.
And then a few days later I discovered that I also was able to see that structure. Also not with my eyes, but somehow with my consciousness. So I always say, as if you have a glass of tea and you put some sugar in it, and when you don't stir, you have layers of a higher density slowly raising. Somehow like that it looked like, without looking like at all. And well, and so that was the only thing that I brought into that incarnation, to have a very, very slight ability to see something like that, what we would call life forces, the etheric. Well, and then was able to take anthroposophy serious as a view of the world, that there is something supersensible relating to the physical world. So it is here and not somewhere on the seventh cloud above or wherever. And so in the second step I took anthroposophy serious as a spiritual path. And so I chose exercises, mantras by Rudolf Steiner, and just began with that. And it is important to say 12 years of practicing didn't change anything. No, nothing happened. But I just had the feeling, stay on with that. It has something to do with yourself. And then after 12 years, when I already had been a teacher for 14 years in a Waldorf school, chemistry, biology, computer science, sitting in the teachers' meeting and suddenly seeing something around my colleagues, which was, of course, a strange perception and something completely different than my wall that I was able to perceive. So I understood that I can develop my capacities. So that was completely new. And then I began to see in the same way, as not with eyes, with a consciousness somehow, strange structures in the nature, in churches, everywhere. And and then of course the main work began, because seeing a structure doesn't mean at all to understand what it is. And when I always say the beings, they don't have a sign hanging around the neck where standing, I am an angel, or I am an elemental being, or I am a dead. So it's hard work to discover what that really is. And and then the main research work began. And so I took anthroposophy serious in the third step as a science, which I found very interesting. Anthroposophy is a science. Okay, well, that speaks to me as a chemist. That means there has to be a method. No? And it doesn't, supersensible perception doesn't fall from the sky. You don't have to look in crystal balls. Also, by the way, I say the people who look in crystal balls, they have for sure a method which is not looking in crystal balls.
Yes, it's just a helping.
It is a helping. Yeah. And so I did a research on myself. I observed myself observing supersensible. And I understood, well, I can describe that. This is a gesture which I can understand. And in understanding that method, I was able to play a bit with that, to change, so to change something, and then seeing, well, with that my capacities change. So I'm able to broaden my abilities to look on the supersensible layers. And when I maybe 7-8 years ago only was able to distinguish life forces, soul forces, spiritual forces, I mean etheric, astral, spiritual layers. With observing myself, observing and practicing further, I'm now able to distinguish 14 supersensible layers. And my specialty now is that I distinguish between these layers, and that I'm able to decide before perceiving on which layer I want to perceive. Wow. If I want to see the life forces or the soul forces or the spiritual forces, which means that I can for example, distinguish raw material, substances, out of which kind of whatever, pyrit, fool's gold, this is a specific mineral. Pyrit.
What's that?
Kattegold. Katzengold. Cat gold, fool's gold. However, this is the thing is, there is a mineral which appears in complete different crystal shapes. So they are cubes, or there are some ortho, rhombo, dodeca, however, something complex, or amorph, which is chemically the same. It is FeS2. But when I compare that on my list with the 14 layers, I see this is completely different. And when the people want to make a homeopathic remedy out of that, they're not interested in the physical one, because of course in that supersensible layers, because that is what should have an effect on the patient. And so which qualities on which layers bring which kind of pyrit in that, and how is that useful for a remedy? Or I can follow something in a process. as my main customer, and as a spiritual researcher, is a company that produces a cancer remedy out of the mistletoe plant. And they do a dynamization with that. A large machine that brings the whole mistletoe juice into movement, and the juice harvested in the winter is spread out horizontally, and the juice harvested in summer drops in that. It's completely complicated and changes the supersensible situation completely. And so these are things that I'm doing in my research. So this is an advice Rudolf Steiner gave how to produce that. And so I can use my methods on saying, oh well, this is really a complete change between the mistletoe juice and the cancer remedy, in spite of that it is physically the same. It's not diluted or so, it is just in a process of dynamization. Well, this is an example of our work today, and but the story how I came to that. Now we just slide it into
I think it's super interesting. But what you do with take this mistletoe thing?
Yeah.
You use your 14 layers to find out what to do with the mistletoe so it works against cancer.
Yeah, that's very.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a very important work, because it is well known that the mistletoe is a very potent remedy, and also against cancer, but it is not so easy that it really reaches its full capacities. As we know that there are complete remissions of tumors under the influence of mistletoe preparations. But in fact, it is not clear why and which mistletoe juice fits to which patient. And the mistletoe, of course, you know that it's green plant. You can also see in the winter, which is because it's still green in the winter, you have the white berries, is growing on different host trees, which means, also when looking onto that as a natural scientist, you have a complete different physiological situation, because it takes the juice out of the tree. And supersensibly, they are also completely different. And I see, in the meantime, I saw about 100 cancer patients supersensibly, and so I distinguished the effect of the mistletoe, and I can see which mistletoe is fitting to a patient, which leads to a complete changing of the supersensible situation of a patient which has cancer. I mean, the patient with cancer, they mostly have the same, let's say, signature. What happens? What is the supersensible constitution that it leads that the patient has a physical manifested tumor?
Can you talk a little bit about that? About how the supersensible body, why it produces illnesses?
There is I'm doing a lot of research on cancer patients, but also increasing part of my work is working with patients with psychosomatic diseases, depressions, burnout, anxiety disorders, chronic fatigue syndrome, and trying to understand these illnesses out of a supersensible view. And what I can say is, when comparing these different illnesses, that most of them have something in common, and that can be called a reduction of the ego system. I will explain it. It's a bit strange. When looking supersensibly on a person, it can be seen in the spiritual levels that there is a core of the personality. Also, this is the, let's say, the eternal part of the person. This is that what incarnates again and again.
Okay.
And when there's the incarnation, so this Ich, as we say in the German language, also this I, this self, or the ego, in English it's a bit difficult to find a fitting word, that has to take place, has to take its home in the body. And there are many possibilities how this process can be disturbed, which is, and then as like biographical catastrophes, so like or when, also like abuse, like rape, or also when a person never got the chance to really develop freely, to be kept under very strict rules of education, very strict religious rules or whatever, that, and it looks supersensibly at as if that spiritual core, that Ich, that I, hides himself in the body, which means, as normally it should spread out all the higher bodies, the life forces body, the soul forces body, but this is like that, which means there is like a gap, and you can also say this is like a wound, and there is something that can take the let's say take place in that gap. There is a supersensible or a spiritual tumor connection. There is something supersensible, meaning the patient. Well, this is it is a complex theme, but just to say it as a gesture, there is something meaning the patient, a spiritual connection, which is on the lowest spiritual level, concerning the substance, identical with the self. And so this is the trick by that, so that it can let's say hit in the wound, which leads maybe 7 years, 8 years or decades later that a manifest tumor appears. To say it in other words, normally this Ich structure has control over our body life processes. It keeps also the shape, which means when there's a wound it heals. And cancer is of course something where something isn't able to have the control anymore. You know, the cells are what is the word? Are parting. It's something is growing where it shouldn't grow, which of course means normally that is kept under control, but something is allowed to have the strength to take its own activity. And this is because they say the Ich structure is weak, and something other can say let this grow, and which means an operation of a tumor doesn't help concerning the origin, because you only remove the
symptom.
Yeah, the symptom, but not the cause. Which means a real healing of cancer must be a spiritual healing, and which means the person has to change himself. I spoke with so many patients, and I always ask them as a key question: did you change something in your life after the diagnosis? And all the people that said to me, no, what shall I change? I don't want to change anything. I just want to become healthy again. But they are lying in the grave after 1 year. And those ones was, well, I don't know, suddenly I thought I should become a vegetarian, or to begin with yoga, or suddenly I'm reading spiritual books. I never did that in my life. They survive and they can become healthy under the influence of also of mistletoe preparations, which means the patient has to be able to get rid of that spiritual connection, and to be able to close the wound, which means there are in the anthroposophy there are eye strengthening therapies, but also or biographical work, which means that the patient understand what has happened, what caused the wound. I always ask, not always, but it's a quite delicate question, but more and more I dare to ask the patient, why did you get cancer? And I was quite surprised that most of the people I asked that are able to say, well, there was the divorce 10 years ago, and I lost everything I had, and then I saw I became ill. Something like that.
Yes.
So in principle, the people know on what they have to work.
Yes, and that's also why it's very important to work when you know you have a trauma.
Yes,
to work
absolutely.
with these things, and that's what we do in the house here. But one thing is, you're talking about a little bit opposite what I was thinking about when you come into this life, into this body. I thought when you came into this life with your new soul, that you also took with you wounds from an earlier life, and that was manifesting in this life. So it's not that way, you mean?
Well, that's also true, but it is, understanding karma is quite easy. Some people think karma is like a religion. You have to believe in that there's karma or not. But supersensibly seen, karma is something quite technical, because every feeling that we have, every thought that we have, is a spiritual reality. It means it's like a being, so it exists there, and you can put it to any place you want, which means you can think of someone, and of course you know that. Oh, I thought about you, and suddenly the phone is ringing, and it's you. So there is something that is transmitted to the other person, and when you observe that supersensibly, it is clear to be seen that there is something that belongs to you, because you are the origin, and which means in the life we are leaving a pearl of chain, as like a chain of pearls, of things, 10,000 of these beings a day, and they are all connected with a specific situation. And when we die and incarnate the next time, we begin in the beginning of that chain of pearls, which means we are meeting the same content in a different situation.
Same problem, kind of problems.
Yeah, well, but and so which means the last lives and this life is spiritually seen the same. It is just another time and new situation, and so which means the content, the idea of what has to happen in a specific situation, that is clear, but not what you do with that.
Yes.
Which means every minute you have the possibility to make the black pearl white, or to make it worse.
Yes.
And so this is how you can understand karma, and where you can work on that situations, and which means, especially as a child that is not strong enough, the impact from the outside can be so strong that it has no chance, say, to overcome that what happened in the last lives. Which means, and then secondarily, something like maybe an etheric blockage or an astral blockage can manifest in the higher bodies of the person, and so that is then that wound that concerns the recent person with this physical, etherical, and astral body.
So that's why you can deal with it later in your life.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that is every time you can come back to the situation that you experience, because it is still there. And when you can, this is the nice thing when believing in reincarnation. You can say, well, you have to work on that, otherwise you will face that in the next life again. Or you say, if I'm not able to, I have another chance in the last life. So that's nice. So you're always in peace, and so which also explains the sense of a reincarnation therapy. I mean, of course, my understanding is that you can that you have to understand your task in this life because this is why you are there. No? Otherwise, you could have stayed in the higher worlds, warm and dry. You have to go through this situation. Well, you.
We're talking about
of reincarnation, radiotherapy. Yeah. Which means you can just come. You have to solve that in your life, but if it's really no possibility, if there's really no clue to find, you can also look in the past life, and you can find that, because it is spiritually the same.
Yeah, the same kind of energy.
It's the same. Yeah. It is just, as I said, a new situation, a new time.
Yes. Yeah. It's so nice to hear this from a scientific view. It sounds very right for me. But time is running here. We have Raphael from Baldron here. Again, he is filling me up with very good interview objects. So he is very occupied about radiation. And could you talk a little bit about how radiation from Wi-Fi, telephones, how that is blocking the high sensibility?
Yeah. Well, I had research requests on that theme, also from people who are living next to a mobile antenna, and who of course wanted to know, what effect does it have on me in my environment, but also on that many people are able to know about the effects. And so I did the same kind of research, not with that 14 layers, looking what is radiating from that, and what effect does it have on us. And it's a complex theme, but to just give it a few directions. There is, I begin differently. Everywhere where there is something physical, something that you can measure, there must be something supersensible that constitutes that. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything. Which means when you have an electromagnetic radiation, there must be something supersensible. Otherwise, there won't be no electromagnetic wave. And so you can distinguish that on two different levels, on the life forces and on the spiritual level. And which means there is always a specific kind of, we say, life ether, which is that kind of energy that keeps us alive, but like misused, radiating out from that mobile antenna, and it's like incorporated in our life system, which means we are all the time in a situation like that in a big town. We are all the time hit by these life forces, which is awful enough. When many people have the luck that they don't perceive that so painfully, but I always say, well, if there wouldn't be electricity for just 1 hour, which of course would be a catastrophe, we would see suddenly how well we feel suddenly. So, well, there is an enormous influence on that, but what I found really shocking is the spiritual influence, which cause really, as you said, a blocking, like the connection to the spiritual world is as veiled. There's also, because as you know, we have our connection to the angel, and the angel has the responsibility to give us impulses out of the higher world, and this connection is veiled, it's blocked, and which has, of course, which has a very strong impact on us. And I always say it is our task for our time to find back to that spiritual world.
Yes.
And this is inhibited by that technology, which is really horrible.
So you're Raphael is right.
yeah. Thank you. We're putting the finger in the wound. It is so. Yeah.
But what can we? We can't take down all these antennas. Can we do something to protect us?
Yeah. Well, this is an important question. I mean, there are technologies to protect. Quite specific ones, and. When there's a lot of research at the moment, and Raphael can talk a lot about that, about how which protection technology works. I always tend to say, better don't think about protection, think about strengthening yourself, that you are not depending anymore of protection, because of course it's wonderful when you have a clear space in that you can sleep, but just when you leave the door, or maybe I don't know how is it here in Oslo, but when you switch on the Wi-Fi detector, you may find 30 Wi-Fi networks in the neighborhood, and maybe you can't. Of course, it's always good to prevent, and maybe you can't tell your neighbors something about. Blocking the connection to the higher world, but maybe you can talk something about electrosmog. So, do you really do you really need your Wi-Fi at 4 o'clock in the morning, dear neighbor? And so this is of course something preventing as much as possible. And on the other hand is that everything that strengthens your ego manifestation. This is the same as with in the beginning with cancer and all these other diseases. So if you are able to strengthen that inner core, which of course has the possibility to take control over your higher bodies, you are always the superior in that possibility. So you can be stronger. And this is also something that Rudolf Steiner said, is we can strengthen our soul forces, our spiritual forces, enormously. And I understand. I'm a friend of technology. I find it always important. You have to know what this technology is doing with you, and how am I able to overcome that challenge. So I'm always saying about strengthening yourself and taking that technology as an invitation for self-development, that you really become stronger, that you can still be the winner in that race of new Wi-Fi routers and new mobile antennas and so on.
But when you're talking about this, if you have a trauma, are you more sensitive to radiation because of the one part of you that's not whole? You're talking about
well, that's a good question, but I can't answer it. I can only answer on something I did a research on, and this is something I didn't research.
Yes. I would say yes.
Yeah, Raphael. Yeah.
Both soul trauma and also, for example, heavy metal toxification, certain chemicals, and you get more sensitive then.
Yeah,
you're right.
Thank you, Raphael.
Our good friend Raphael.
But then again, a trauma can also be healed spiritually, and then that can help a lot also to not be so sensitive.
But I feel we could be talking for hours, but I think we have to start shutting down. Is there anything you want to tell the world, a message to the world?
Oh God! No. Well, yes. Many people think that the supersensible worlds are far away, that the angels are in the heaven and that the dead are on the graveyard and the elemental beings are running around in the forest or whatever. And I always want to say, they are all here, and we are surrounded by the supersensible worlds. We can't go 2 steps to walk in a new structure of being. And so this is an ocean. of anything. And we just, I dare to say, we just dislearned to knowing it. And this is such an important field because we are, let's say, we are only perceiving 5% of the reality. And this is really a chance for self-development. But understanding the supersensible world is just the mean. So it is not, as I always say, I really recommend going a spiritual path not because of wanting to perceive all that world, but the world is a help to become clearer about that and to go your path, which is a path of self-development. And this is the core. This ich-strengthening self-development, which is healthy for yourself. Physically, also really healthy for yourself in understanding your task in that world, and healthy for the surrounding, for the social world, because when you are more clear about yourself, you can help all the others. You can be more harmonious in the social world. So this is my word as a really recommendation to become clearer of this world and go a spiritual path.
One last question when you're talking about that. So do you agree that we are reincarnated in this lifetime to learn?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
No, well.
Just wanted to. Okay, Raphael wanted to tell about he's coming back next summer. Summer conference in spiritual research. This is super exciting. 6th to 9th of August next year, 2016. I think we'll put it on our website when it comes up, when the program comes up. So this is important. And you have a website we can read about you?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And then I'll put his website here. I'll put it on the video.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So this is super.
Thank you very much.
I'm getting goosebumps. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And see you next year. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to Matthew.
Yeah, thank you.